This story is titled, My Girlfriend Let Her Best Friend Move Into My Spare Room, Rent-Free, and Expected Me to Pay All Bills. I ended the relationship and changed the locks. Hi everyone. Before we dive in, a quick favor. If you enjoy content like this, please hit the subscribe button. It's free, supports the channel, and make sure you never miss out on amazing videos. Alright, let's get started. Hey Reddit! If someone told me a year ago that my peaceful, well-earned life in the city would turn into chaos because of a temporary guest, I would have laughed. But here I am, shaking my head at my own stupidity. So, I live in a big two-bedroom apartment in Denver. It's not some luxury penthouse, but it's got floor-to-ceiling windows, tons of natural light, and a killer view of the skyline. It's one of those places you walk into and feel like you've made it. I worked hard to afford it, working weekends, skipping vacations, eating way too many cheap meals while saving up. When I finally moved in, I promised myself this space would stay mine, a place I could unwind after long days and just enjoy life. The second bedroom was never meant for anyone but me. I turned it into a home office where I could work remotely and store my guitar collection. It was my creative space, my sanctuary, and a spot for the rare times I wanted to play host. I had a routine. I worked hard, hung out with my buddies, and spent weekends recharging in my own quiet space. Life was solid. Then came Jenna. I met her at a mutual friend's birthday party. She was everything I was looking for. Outgoing, loud, and totally captivating. She had this way of commanding attention, and I guess I got pulled into her orbit. At first, she seemed like the perfect balance to my quiet life. She was fun, spontaneous, and had this infectious energy that made me feel alive. We hit it off right away. Jenna didn't waste time moving into my life, figuratively and literally. We started dating, and before long, we were spending more and more time together. At first, we mostly hung out at her place. She lived in a tiny one-bedroom apartment that felt cramped, especially compared to mine. It wasn't long before she started dropping hints about how much she loved my apartment. "This place is so nice," she'd say, looking around with a big grin. "Way better than mine. It just feels homey." At first, it was little things. She'd leave a sweater on my couch or a toothbrush in my bathroom. Then it became makeup on the counter, a pair of shoes by the door, and some decorative pillows she brought over to spruce up the living room. I figured it was just a natural part of being in a relationship. Plus, I liked Jenna. I wanted her to feel comfortable in my space, even if it felt a little fast. By the time we hit the 6-month mark, it was like she had unofficially moved in. She never actually said, "I'm moving in," but it just happened. She spent more nights at my place than at her own, had clothes in my closet, and even started receiving packages at my address. I didn't push back because, at the time, it didn't feel like a big deal. I mean, I liked having her around. Jenna was fun and easy to be with, so I brushed off the little changes. But looking back, that's where it started. The shift from my space to our space. At first, I was happy to share. But there's a difference between sharing your life with someone and losing control of it. And I was about to learn that the hard way. Jenna had this knack for making herself at home wherever she went. It was like she had a radar for finding the most comfortable spots and claiming them. She rearranged my throw pillows, started leaving candles everywhere, and even tried convincing me to repaint the walls to brighten up the space. I remember laughing it off, thinking, this is just what happens when you date someone. But deep down, I started to notice how much my place was changing, and not all for the better. It wasn't just the apartment. Jenna had this way of inviting herself into every corner of my life. She'd scroll through my streaming subscriptions, picking random shows to binge, and once even changed my profile name to Cutie Pie Jenna. She'd open my fridge and comment on my groceries, saying things like, "Why do you always buy plain yogurt? Get the flavored ones. They're better." Little stuff that wasn't a big deal individually, but together, it started to feel like I was losing control of my own home. Still, I ignored it. Jenna was great company, and it was nice having someone around. She wasn't demanding or mean. She just had this way of making herself comfortable, sometimes at my expense. And honestly, I figured that's just part of being in a relationship. You compromise, right? You adapt. That's what I told myself anyway. The thing is, my apartment was my sanctuary. I'd worked so hard to get here, and for the first time in years, I had a place where I could breathe. It was my safe space, a little bubble of peace in the middle of a chaotic city. Sharing that with someone was supposed to be a good thing. But as the weeks went by, I started to feel like my sanctuary wasn't mine anymore. The changes were subtle at first, but they added up. Jenna's stuff started taking over. My bathroom countertop, once clean and organized, was now cluttered with makeup, hair products, and God knows what else. My living room, once minimalist and tidy, had throw blankets and decorative knickknacks I'd never buy in a million years. Even my home office, the one room I thought I could keep as my own, had started to feel less like mine. Jenna would pop in during the day, just to say hi, or sit at my desk to do her nails, leaving behind a mess of polish and cotton balls. I told myself it was fine. Jenna was just making herself at home. But looking back, I realize how much I gave up in the name of keeping the peace. I didn't speak up because I didn't want to seem ungrateful or unkind. But the truth was, I missed my space. I missed the quiet, the order, the feeling of being in control of my own life. At the time, I had no idea how much worse it was about to get. But if I'd known what was coming, I probably would have set boundaries a whole lot sooner. When Jenna called me that Thursday afternoon, she sounded frantic. "Greg, Taylor just got kicked out of her apartment," she said, practically shouting into the phone. "She has nowhere to go. Can she crash with you for a while? Just until she figures things out?" I paused. I didn't know Taylor personally. Jenna had mentioned her here and there. Wild stories about dramatic breakups, landlord disputes, and misunderstandings at work. She was one of those people who always seemed to have something going on. But I wasn't heartless. People hit rough patches, and if Jenna cared about her enough to advocate for her, I figured she couldn't be that bad. "All right," I said reluctantly. "She can stay for a couple of weeks, but just a couple of weeks." Jenna was ecstatic. "You're the best. Seriously, Greg, I owe you one." Ipersuro. The next day, Taylor arrived, and it was clear from the start that a couple of weeks was probably not part of her plan. An Uber pulled up to the curb, and the driver looked visibly annoyed as he unloaded what seemed like an endless pile of bags. 6 suitcases, 2 duffel bags, and multiple shopping bags later, Taylor strutted into my apartment with her cat carrier in one hand and her phone in the other. "Wow, this is way bigger than my old place," she said, glancing around like she was house shopping. She didn't bother with a thank you or even a polite smile. She just headed straight for the second bedroom, my home office, and dumped her stuff everywhere. My guitars were shoved to the corner, and my desk was instantly buried under her bags. It wasn't exactly the start I was hoping for. Jenna, of course, was all smiles. "See? It's perfect for you," she told Taylor, like I wasn't standing right there. I stayed quiet, trying to convince myself that Taylor was just overwhelmed and would settle in soon enough. But by the very next morning, it was clear that her idea of settling in was very different from mine. At 7 a.m. on a Saturday, my only day to sleep in, I was jolted awake by blaring music. It wasn't just loud, it was shake the walls loud. I stumbled out of bed, groggy and annoyed, and knocked on her door. "Hey, could you turn that down?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. Taylor opened the door with a smirk. "Oh, sorry," she said casually. "I'm not used to being quiet in the mornings." She said it like it was the most normal thing in the world. I stared at her, waiting for some acknowledgement that this wasn't okay. None came. I repeated my request to keep the volume down, and she nodded, closing the door. The music dropped a little but was still loud enough to be annoying. I sighed and went back to bed, but it wasn't long before I was interrupted again, this time by her cat. Now, I didn't even know Taylor had a cat until she showed up with it. A scruffy tabby that looked perpetually annoyed. It spent most of its time wandering the apartment, acting like it owned the place. Within the first few hours, it had already scratched my couch and knocked over a small plant I'd had for years. The next morning, it puked on my living room rug. I tried to bring it up casually. "Hey, Taylor, your cat got sick on the rug," I said. She barely looked up from her phone. "Oh, Mr. Whiskers is just adjusting," she said with a shrug. "He'll settle down soon." But Mr. Whiskers didn't settle down. He kept scratching the furniture, climbing onto the counters, and leaving fur everywhere. I like animals, but this cat was a terror. The worst part was how comfortable she seemed with it all. She didn't ask for permission before making changes or taking over space. She didn't even seem embarrassed about the inconvenience she was causing. She acted like my apartment was hers, and I was just the guy who happened to live there. Every time I brought something up, Jenna would brush it off. "Greg, she's going through a lot right now," she'd say. "Can't you just be a little more patient?" I was trying to be patient, but Taylor made it hard. Between the loud music, the destructive cat, and her complete lack of boundaries, I felt like I was losing control of my own space. Still, I told myself it was just a temporary situation. I thought I could handle Taylor being in my apartment for a couple of weeks, but by the end of the first one, it was clear this arrangement was costing me more than just my peace of mind. My utility bills, which had always been manageable, were suddenly out of control. The first sign was the thermostat. Taylor treated the apartment like it was a luxury spa. She cranked the AC up to Arctic blast and left it running all day, even when she wasn't in the room. If I turned it down, she'd immediately bump it back up and say something like, "It's just too hot in here." Never mind that I was the one paying for it. Lights were another issue. Taylor had a bad habit of turning on every single light in the apartment and leaving them on, even if she wasn't using the room. One night, I came home from work and found the kitchen, living room, and second bedroom lit up like a Christmas display. Taylor was in the living room, glued to the TV, and when I asked if she could try turning lights off when she wasn't using them, she gave me the most casual response. "Oh, I guess I forgot." She forgot every single day. The water bill was no better. Taylor loved taking showers, long, scalding ones. I'm not exaggerating when I say she'd be in there for 40 minutes or more. The hot water would run out, and I'd have to wait hours for it to come back. The sink was constantly running too, because she'd leave it on while brushing her teeth or doing whatever it is she did in the bathroom. After the first week, I sat down to do some quick math and realized my utilities had basically doubled since Taylor moved in. But it wasn't just the bills. Taylor's freeloading extended into every corner of my life, and her entitlement was next level. For starters, she treated my kitchen like her personal grocery store. I'm the kind of guy who plans out meals for the week, buys what I need, and sticks to it. I had a good system going until Taylor showed up. She didn't contribute a dime to groceries, but had no problem eating whatever she wanted. I'd come home expecting to make dinner, only to find the key ingredients gone. Eggs? Gone. Cheese? Gone. The leftovers I'd been saving for lunch? Gone. Taylor didn't just eat my food. She didn't even bother to ask. One day, I came home to find her making a smoothie with the last of my bananas and my almond butter. She looked up and said, "You didn't mind if I used these, right?" What was I supposed to say? She'd already used them. When I mentioned the grocery situation to Jenna, hoping she'd back me up, she waved it off. "Greg, she doesn't have money right now. What do you expect her to do, starve?" That wasn't the point. I wasn't expecting Taylor to starve, but I also didn't expect to foot the bill for someone who didn't even have the decency to ask before raiding my kitchen. Speaking of Jenna, she was over more than ever. I hadn't fully realized it before, but her unofficial move-in was becoming more official by the day. With Taylor around, Jenna seemed to feel like she had to be there too, whether it was to support her friend or just hang out. Whatever the reason, the dynamic had shifted, and not in a good way. It wasn't just the utilities or groceries that were driving me nuts. Taylor had no concept of personal space or boundaries. My home office, which I'd reluctantly given up to her, was no longer recognizable. She didn't just store her things in there, she completely took over. My desk was buried under her makeup and hair products, my guitars were shoved into the corner, and the floor was covered in random piles of clothes and shoes. One evening, I tried to grab my laptop from the office to finish up some work. When I walked in, I found Taylor sitting on the floor with her makeup spread out like she was running a full-on beauty salon. She barely looked up. "Do you need something?" she asked, as if I were the one invading her space. I grabbed my laptop and left, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was a guest in my own home. Taylor's attitude made it clear she thought she was here to stay. She treated the apartment like she owned it. From her comments about the furniture, "This couch is so uncomfortable," to her suggestions about decor, "You should really get a nicer rug for the living room." It wasn't just her tone, it was her total lack of awareness that drove me insane. Even when I tried to set boundaries, Taylor brushed them off. One night, I told her I'd appreciate it if she could keep her music down after 10 p.m. She nodded, but the next night, the same thing happened. The bass from her speaker rattled the walls, and when I knocked on her door, she said, "Oh, I didn't realize it was that late." She didn't realize every night, the more I tried to address these issues, the more I felt like I was talking to a wall. Taylor didn't seem to care, and Jenna wasn't much help. Whenever I brought something up, Jenna's response was the same. "Greg, she's going through a rough time. Can't you just cut her some slack?" But how much slack was I supposed to give? I was already covering the bills, buying the groceries, and dealing with the constant disruptions to my routine. I was trying to be patient, but my patience was running out. Things came to a head when I checked my utility bills for the month. The numbers were staggering. Electricity had nearly tripled, water was through the roof, and my grocery expenses were absurd. I couldn't ignore it anymore. That night, I sat Jenna down and told her we needed to have a serious talk. "Taylor has to start contributing," I said firmly. "I can't keep covering all these extra expenses." Jenna looked at me like I'd suggested kicking a puppy. "Greg, she doesn't have a job right now. What do you expect her to do?" "I don't know, Jenna, but this isn't sustainable," I replied. "She's been here for weeks, and she's not even trying to help out. She eats my food, uses my stuff, and doesn't pay for anything. It's not fair." Jenna sighed. "It's just temporary," she said. But at that moment, I realized we had very different definitions of temporary. If I thought Taylor's freeloading and boundary stomping were bad before, I wasn't ready for what came next. Her entitlement didn't just grow, it went full nuclear. And by then, I realized she had absolutely no intention of leaving or respecting the fact that this was my apartment. It all started with the uninvited guests. One night after work, I walked into my apartment to find two strangers lounging on my couch. They were eating snacks from my kitchen and watching my TV like it was their living room. Taylor was sitting with them, laughing and chatting as if this were completely normal. I stood there for a second, trying to process what I was seeing. Finally, I asked, "Who are they?" "Oh, these are my friends," Taylor said casually, as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. "They stopped by to hang out for a bit." Stopped by? Without asking me? I could feel my blood pressure rising, but I bit my tongue. "Next time, Could you give me a heads up before inviting people over? I said as calmly as I could manage. Taylor didn't even look up from her phone. Sure, whatever, she mumbled. Her friends didn't budge. They stayed for another hour, leaving behind empty soda cans and crumbs on my coffee table. The worst part? Jenna wasn't just fine with it. She defended it. When I told her later how uncomfortable it made me, she rolled her eyes. Greg, you're being so uptight. It's not like they trashed the place. Not trashed? My living room looked like a daycare after snack time. But that wasn't the only time Taylor started bringing people over unannounced. The next week, I came home to find her hosting a girls' night with 3 of her friends. They were sitting around my dining table, drinking coffee from my mugs and snacking on my food. The fridge door was wide open, and I could see they'd helped themselves to everything from my deli meat to the good cheese I'd been saving for a weekend sandwich. When I walked in, Taylor barely acknowledged me. "Oh, hey, Greg," she said, as if I was the guest in my own home. I stood there for a moment, weighing whether I should say something or just walk away. Finally, I said, "Hey, Taylor, I didn't know we were hosting a party tonight." "It's not a party," she said with a laugh. "Just a little hangout. Relax, relax." That was her go-to word whenever she crossed a line. It wasn't just frustrating, it was infuriating. It wasn't just the uninvited guests either. Taylor had started treating my apartment like a free-for-all. She'd rearrange furniture without asking, claiming she was making it more functional. My home office was now a storage dump for her things, and the living room looked like a thrift store. One day, I came home to find a random throw blanket draped over the couch. "Where'd this come from?" I asked Jenna. "Oh, Taylor thought the couch needed more color," Jenna said, like it was no big deal. "More color," I said. "It's my couch." Jenna rolled her eyes again. "Greg, it's just a blanket. Don't make a big deal out of it." It wasn't about the blanket. It was about the fact that Taylor had no respect for the fact that this was my home. The fridge was another battleground. Taylor had started stocking it with her own groceries she wasn't paying for. She'd go out with Jenna, buy snacks and drinks, and then stick them in the fridge like she owned it. And when I say her groceries, I mean overpriced, trendy stuff like kombucha, organic kale, and oat milk. Meanwhile, my stuff kept disappearing. One morning, I went to grab a bagel, only to find that all the cream cheese was gone. When I mentioned it to Jenna, she shrugged. "Oh, Taylor must have used it. I'll talk to her." She never did. It got to the point where I felt like I couldn't even relax in my own space. If I sat on the couch to watch TV, Taylor would suddenly come in and ask to use the living room. "I need to make a video for my TikTok," she said one night. "The lighting in here is better." "Can it wait?" I asked, already dreading her response. She gave me an exaggerated sigh. "Ugh, fine, but I really need to get this done." She made it clear she wasn't happy about it. For the rest of the night, she stomped around the apartment, slamming doors and muttering under her breath. And Jenna? She didn't just enable Taylor, she seemed to take her side every time. Whenever I brought up an issue, Jenna would deflect. "Greg, you don't know what she's been through." What she'd been through? What about what I was going through? My apartment was no longer mine. My bills were piling up, and I couldn't even sit on my own couch without feeling like I was intruding. The final straw came one night when Taylor decided to throw a mini party in the apartment. I wasn't home when it started. I had stayed late at work, but when I walked in, the place was packed with people I didn't know. Music was blasting, empty cups were scattered everywhere, and someone had spilled a drink on my coffee table. I turned to Jenna, who was sitting on the couch like nothing was wrong. "What is this?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's just a little get-together," she said, shrugging. Taylor needed to blow off some steam. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My apartment was being trashed, my boundaries were being trampled, and Jenna acted like I was the one out of line. If I thought I'd already seen the worst of Taylor's entitlement, I was dead wrong. The moment I found out she had borrowed my credit card was when everything truly fell apart. It wasn't just the theft, it was the complete lack of remorse, the audacity, and the way Jenna defended her. That was when I realized there was no salvaging this situation or this relationship. It started on an ordinary Thursday. I got home from work and noticed a few grocery bags on the counter. They weren't my usual stuff, no staples I'd buy for myself. Instead, they were packed with overpriced organic produce, specialty snacks, and some fancy bottled cold brew. I thought maybe Jenna had done a grocery run, so I asked her. "Oh no, that was Taylor," Jenna said casually, not even looking up from her phone. "Taylor?" She hadn't paid for anything since she moved in, so I was curious where she suddenly got the money. "She paid for it?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. Jenna hesitated for just a moment, and that was enough to make me suspicious. "Well, not exactly," she said, her voice trailing off. I immediately felt a pit in my stomach. "What do you mean, not exactly?" "She used your card," Jenna said, her tone so nonchalant it made my blood boil. "But don't freak out. She said she'll pay you back." "Wait, what?" I said, my voice rising. "She used my card? How did she even get it? Jenna shrugged. She found it in the kitchen drawer. She thought it would be fine since you can afford it. I stormed into the living room, where Taylor was sprawled out on the couch, scrolling through her phone. Taylor, I said sharply, holding up the bags of groceries. Did you seriously use my credit card without asking me? She looked up, completely unbothered. Oh yeah, she said. I meant to tell you. I was out of stuff, and I saw your card in the drawer. I figured you wouldn't mind. You figured I wouldn't mind? I repeated, my voice shaking with anger. You didn't think to ask? She shrugged like it was no big deal. Greg, come on. It's not like I spent a ton of money, and you're the one with the big apartment. You can afford it. That sentence hit me like a brick. I can afford it. As if my ability to pay for something justified her taking it without permission. You don't just take someone's credit card, Taylor, I snapped. That's theft. Relax, she said, rolling her eyes. I said I'll pay you back, but I knew she wouldn't. She hadn't paid for anything since she moved in, and there was no reason to believe she'd start now. I turned to Jenna, hoping she'd finally see how insane this was. Do you hear this? She stole my card, and you're okay with it? Jenna sighed, like I was the one being unreasonable. Greg, you're overreacting. It's not like she drained your account. She just bought groceries for the apartment. For herself, I shot back. None of this is even stuff I eat. Greg, Jenna said, her voice taking on that patronizing tone I'd come to hate. You've been so generous already. What's a little more? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Jenna wasn't just defending Taylor, she was enabling her. It was clear now that she didn't care about how this affected me, as long as her best friend was comfortable. I felt something snap inside me. This isn't working, I said, my voice firm. This whole situation isn't working. Taylor needs to leave, and honestly, Jenna, I think you should too. Jenna's jaw dropped. You're breaking up with me? Over this? Yes, I said. Because this isn't about Taylor anymore. It's about the fact that you've been defending her behavior instead of supporting me. You don't respect my boundaries, and you don't care about how this is affecting me. That's not a healthy relationship. Jenna's face twisted in anger. You're throwing everything away because you can't handle a little inconvenience? A little inconvenience? I said, laughing bitterly. Jenna, this isn't a little inconvenience. Taylor has taken over my apartment, run up my bills, stolen my credit card, and you've stood by her the whole time. I'm done. Taylor, who had been watching the argument with a smug look on her face, decided to chime in. You can't just kick us out, she said. Jenna's practically living here too, so good luck with that. I turned to her, furious. Watch me. That night, I printed out 2 notices to vacate. I'd done my research earlier, knowing things might come to this. In my state, guests who don't pay rent and aren't on the lease can be asked to leave with a formal notice. I wrote up the notices, giving both Taylor and Jenna 3 days to pack up and leave. The next morning, I handed them the papers. Taylor looked at the notice, crumpled it up, and threw it in the trash. You're not serious, she said, laughing. I'm dead serious, I said. You have 3 days. After that, I'll take legal action if I have to. Jenna stared at me, her eyes blazing. You're really going to do this? To me? Yes, I said simply. Because this isn't your apartment. It's mine. And I'm done being taken advantage of. Taylor smirked. We're not going anywhere. Her arrogance only made me more determined. I knew I'd have to follow through, and I was prepared to do whatever it took to reclaim my home. As I watched Jenna and Taylor storm off to the second bedroom, slamming the door behind them, I felt a strange sense of relief. For the first time in weeks, I had made a decision that put me first. And no matter how messy things got over the next few days, I knew I was finally taking back control of my life. After handing them the 3-day notices, the atmosphere in the apartment turned icy. Taylor acted like I'd committed some unforgivable crime, while Jenna spent most of her time sulking in the corner or shooting me dirty looks. Honestly, I was fine with the silent treatment. It was better than their usual chaos. But of course, Taylor wasn't going to take the notice seriously. The next day, I walked into the living room and found her lounging on the couch like a queen, feet up on the coffee table, flipping through channels. The audacity was unreal. So, when are you packing? I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. She didn't even look at me. I told you, Greg, we're not going anywhere. You can't just kick us out. It's not a request, Taylor, I said firmly. You've got 2 days left. If you're still here after that, I'll have no choice but to involve the police. She finally turned to me, smirking. Go ahead. Call them. See how that works out for you. Her confidence was baffling, but I wasn't about to let her intimidate me. Jenna, on the other hand, was in full damage control mode. Later that evening, she pulled me aside and started with her usual routine. Greg, can't we just talk about this? She said, her voice dripping with faux sweetness. You're being so unreasonable. Unreasonable? I said, raising an eyebrow. Jenna, I've been more than reasonable. I let your friend stay here for weeks. She's my best friend, Jenna snapped. What was I supposed to do? Let her be homeless? That's not my responsibility, I replied. I've done more than enough, and you know it. If you cared about me, you'd have supported me instead of enabling her. Her face twisted in frustration. This is so typical of you, Greg. You always make everything about yourself. At that point, I realized there was no point in arguing. Jenna wasn't going to see my side because she didn't want to. She'd chosen Taylor over me, and I wasn't going to waste any more energy trying to convince her otherwise. The next day, the tension in the apartment was unbearable. Taylor was more obnoxious than ever, blasting her music, leaving her messes everywhere, and doing everything she could to get under my skin. I caught her in the kitchen, drinking from a carton of juice that I'd bought, and when I shot her a look, she just smirked and walked away. By the third day, the deadline I'd given them, I was ready for whatever showdown was coming. I got home from work early, bracing myself for a fight, and found the apartment in complete disarray. Time's up, I said, standing in the doorway. You both need to pack up and leave. Taylor looked up from her phone, her expression smug. I told you we're not leaving anywhere, Greg. Like I said, make us if you can. I nodded, keeping my composure. All right, I said calmly. You were warned. I walked into my room, grabbed my phone, and called the non-emergency police line. I explained the situation to the officer on the other end, detailing how I'd given proper notice and that my guests were now refused. They assured me that I was within my rights and sent a couple of officers over to help resolve the situation. When the police arrived, Taylor's confidence started to crack. She opened the door with her usual attitude, but the second she saw the uniforms, her tone changed. What's going on? She asked, trying to sound innocent. The officers explained that I had asked her and Jenna to leave, provided proper notice, and that if they refused, they could be removed as trespassers. Taylor immediately started arguing, claiming she had a verbal agreement with me to stay as long as she needed. She's lying, I said, showing the officers the notice I'd given her and the text messages I'd sent documenting everything. One officer turned to Taylor. Ma'am, you don't have a lease, you haven't paid rent, and you've been formally asked to leave. You need to pack up your belongings and vacate the premises. Taylor tried to argue some more, but the officers weren't having it. Jenna jumped in, her voice shaking with anger. This is so unfair. Greg's just trying to punish us because he's mad. Ma'am, the officer said, cutting her off. This isn't a debate. You've been asked to leave. You need to comply. Realizing they weren't going to win, Jenna and Taylor finally started packing. It was the most passive-aggressive packing I've ever seen. Taylor slammed drawers, muttered under her breath, and made a big show of stuffing her things into bags. Jenna wasn't much better. She kept muttering things like, "You'll regret this, Greg." It took them over an hour to gather their things. Taylor tried to take some of my stuff, but I pointed it out, and the officer made her put it back. She acted like it was the biggest injustice in the world. When they were finally done, the officers escorted them out of the building. Jenna turned to me one last time before leaving. "You're going to miss me, Greg," she said bitterly. I didn't even respond. I just closed the door behind them and locked it. For the first time in weeks, the apartment was silent. The mess they left behind was overwhelming. Trash, food wrappers, and random junk scattered everywhere. But I didn't care. They were gone, and that was all that mattered. I spent the rest of the evening cleaning and changing the locks. As I scrubbed the counters and vacuumed the floors, I felt a strange mix of exhaustion and relief. It was over. The nightmare was finally over. I slept better that night than I had in weeks, knowing I'd finally taken back control of my life. A few weeks after I got my apartment back to its former peaceful state, I started hearing whispers through mutual acquaintances about what had happened to them. Jenna and Taylor had found a new place, a shared apartment that they could barely afford. At first, I was annoyed that they'd landed on their feet so quickly, but then I learned the details. Their new landlord wasn't putting up with any of their nonsense. Apparently, Taylor had tried pulling her same old tricks, leaving lights on all day, hosting random people without permission, and generally treating the place like her personal kingdom. The landlord gave them a warning within the first month, and when things didn't improve, he slapped them with a hefty fine. Taylor, being Taylor, refused to pay her share, leaving Jenna to cover the costs. That was just the beginning. Taylor's freeloading finally started to wear on Jenna. Mutual friends told me they were constantly fighting. Taylor wanted to live like a queen, without contributing a dime, and Jenna was stuck footing the bill for both of them. Their friendship, which had seemed unbreakable, quickly turned toxic. The breaking point came when Taylor borrowed Jenna's credit card, just like she'd done with mine. She racked up charges for groceries, online shopping, and even a spa day. Jenna, who had defended Taylor's behavior for weeks, finally had enough. The two of them had a massive blowout. And from what I heard, Taylor stormed out, leaving Jenna with an unpaid rent bill and a pile of debt. Their friendship didn't survive. Taylor moved back in with her parents, who were less than thrilled to have her freeloading ways back in their house, and Jenna was left to pick up the pieces. As for Jenna, It didn't take long before she tried to reach out to me. It started with a text. Hey, Greg. I've been thinking about you a lot lately. I'm really sorry for how everything went down. Can we talk? I stared at the message for a long time, wondering if she actually felt bad or if she was just looking for another place to crash. Either way, I wasn't interested. I didn't reply. A week later, she sent another message. I know I messed up, but I hope you can forgive me. I miss you. I deleted it without responding. The final attempt came a month later, when she showed up at my apartment unannounced. I opened the door to find her standing there, looking sheepish. Greg, she said, her voice soft. I wanted to apologize in person. I really screwed up, and I hate how things ended. Can we talk? I shook my head. Jenna, I've moved on. I suggest you do the same. Her face fell, but I didn't feel bad. She'd made her choices, and so had I. I closed the door and didn't look back. Since then, I've heard little about Jenna or Taylor. Mutual friends say Jenna's been trying to rebuild her life, but she's struggled to repair the bridges she burned. Taylor, meanwhile, has apparently cycled through several living situations, each one more temporary than the last. Looking back, I'm grateful for everything that happened. Not because it was easy, but because it taught me a lesson I'll never forget. I learned the importance of setting boundaries, standing up for myself, and recognizing when someone's taking advantage of my kindness. My apartment is peaceful again, my bills are back to normal, and my life feels like my own. And as for Jenna and Taylor? Well, let's just say karma did its thing. If there's one piece of advice I'd give to anyone reading this, it's this. Never let someone guilt you into sacrificing your own peace for their entitlement. Stand your ground. It's worth it.